Hi, welcome to another edition of Antique Radio Archaeology. Today we're going to be building some reproduction B and C batteries for use in 1920s radio sets. Now before we begin that project, let's talk a little bit about the batteries of that particular era. Now, in the early years of radio, they started off with lead acid batteries used in glass jars, and these things were just a mess. But that's what they had and that's what they used. Now, of course, alternating current really didn't become a thing until the mid-20s, especially in the radio world. So up till then, all radios were powered by battery. Now, the lead acid batteries obviously have a lot of disadvantages to them, but they were rechargeable and a lot of people had access to them. What really kind of changed the battery market for radios was the introduction of carbon zinc batteries. Now this used a combination of carbon and zinc to produce a voltage, and they lasted specific amounts of time. Now they took on many different forms, and what you have here is several forms that were used. This here is an A battery. It's a volt and a half. And they were used mainly to power the filaments of tube radios, the filament circuits. So A batteries were, because they were a volt and a half, some of the early tubes obviously were a volt and a half, but latter tubes were usually averaging around 6 volts, so you would need 4 of these in order to utilize them in a 1920s radio set in order to power the filament voltages. So that was the A battery, and the B batteries were higher voltages. They were used in the plate circuits of 1920s radios, and they averaged usually around 22 volts to up to 135 volts. Now obviously you didn't have 135 volt batteries. You had 45 volt batteries and 22 volt batteries. Now obviously two 22 volt batteries would make 45 volts, so combinations of those were used to get those higher voltages. If you had a plate circuit voltage of 45 volts, you could either use a 45 volt battery like these two, or you could use a 22.5 volt battery times 2. You just hook them in series. Now if you had a 90 volt circuit, you could use two 45 volt batteries, and in that case you would have your 90 volts. If you wanted 135 volts, you use 3 batteries, so forth and so on. Now the other circuit that usually isn't that big of a deal, because in a lot of the early 1920s radios you didn't really have to worry about the C battery, because what you would do is hook your grid to the A minus on the radio itself. But in the latter part of the 1920s, as the radios became more complex, C batteries became the way to go on those type of radios. So what a C battery was, it was a minus voltage applied to the grid. And the way you would do that is you'd put the plus on the A minus or B minus, and you'd take the minus side of this battery and you would put that to the grid. Now this particular battery had a couple of voltages. This one only had 1 voltage. This was minus 4.5 volts. I think this one's minus 4.5 and minus 22 volts. So it just all depended on the battery itself. So we are going to talk a little bit about what's available now. So what we've got here is some modern batteries. This here is actually a reproduction battery that produces 67 volts B battery voltage. These 45 volt batteries are made by Reproduction, and unfortunately they're no longer available. I don't know what happened. They were a bit expensive. They're about $23 a piece, but gosh, they lasted a long time. I've had these for a couple of years and they're still actually working. Of course, you got a regular 9-volt battery, so there's some cases where you would actually need 9 volts. But for the A battery on most of the 1920s radios that use the 01A tubes and better, used 6 volts for filament voltage. Now the problem with filament voltages is they tend to draw a lot of current. So because of that, you need a robust battery to reproduce that voltage. Now, since 6-volt batteries are still readily available and very inexpensive, this was only about $6 or $7. I really don't want to create a reproduction battery for that. But these 45-volt batteries are hard to come by and very expensive, and the C batteries, which produce my minus 4.5 volts and my minus 22 volts, are almost impossible to find. So we are going to build those. Now this is the way you would typically hook up an A and a B battery. Now this is on a radio and amplifier combination. As you can see, you've got your A battery hooked here and here, and then you just paralleled it over to the amplifier. So that provided the filament voltage on both radios. And then your B battery, your 45 volts, would be hooked over here to your B plus and your B minus. And again, jumpered over to the amplifier itself. And here it is in actual operation. As you can see, I've got my A battery here and my B battery. Now this is another combination in which we're using a 90 volt B battery, which could be considered a B++, and then you have a B battery and of course your A battery. And as you can see, you would have your A minus hooked between ground and your A minus lead. Your A plus would typically be jumpered over to your B minus, and then your 45 volts, your plus, would be hooked to your minus on the second one to produce the 90 volts for your B++. Again, here is the actual hookup on a radio itself. Now this is where things get a little more complex. And here you can see a bunch of A batteries hooked together to produce your filament voltage. You've got a B battery voltage of 22 volts and 45 volts here. So those were tapped off in those configurations. And of course you have your C battery. Now your C plus is hooked over here to your A minus, and your C minus of course is hooked there. So that's minus 4.5 volts to the grid circuit. Now for today's project, we're going to use a combination of 9 volt and AA batteries. These are all readily available, very inexpensive, and by using combinations of these, we can create batteries that we can use in these circuits. Now, the thing to keep in mind is the grid and the plate circuits do not draw a lot of current. Therefore, you can use these smaller batteries and get quite a bit of life out of them, whereas with the 6-volt lantern batteries, those have high current draw, so those are a little harder to replicate with these small batteries. For the C battery, what we're going to do is we're going to use a couple of 9-volt batteries, and then we're going to use 3 1.5-volt AA batteries. This will give me my C battery plus, starting here, my minus 4.5 volts will come off the negative terminal here to create that. And then I'm going to jumper off that and use 2 9-volt batteries to get my neg 22.5. Now if you look, you got 9 volt, that's 18, plus the 4.5 volts from the AA batteries to give me my minus 22.5. Finally, for my B battery, I'm just going to use 5 9-volt batteries to produce my minus and plus 45 volts. So let's go ahead and get started. Oops, where my terminal's gonna go. Alright. One of my pluses here for the 9-volt, I have to go on there. But before I do that, I'm going to join these two together. Alright. Oops, AC, DC. Here's 18, minus 18. There's my, that's minus 4.83. And that should be minus 22 is minus 23.8. So, there we have it. So I went ahead and I found an image of a battery. I went ahead and changed this in Microsoft Paint and stretched it out and resized it in Microsoft Word for the printout for the exact measurements of this, which are 8 inches by 3. So this pretty much fits. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and reassemble everything. What I'm going to do to hold these in place, a little hot glue gun here, just a little bit. Drop that bad boy in there. Same here. Alright, so it's held together by magnets. So this is my label for my C battery. This is Paint 3D from Microsoft. Comes free on every computer. What I want to do first is let's resize this. I'm going to go to my canvas. Now right now I'm at 8,000 by 3,000 pixels, and I want it to be 6 inches tall and 3.8 inches wide, so that's 38. Let's go to 3800 wide. No, I don't want to let my, I want to resize the image with canvas. So if I hit that right there and I go to 3800, hit enter. Alright, it has now resized it for that size. Now the problem is I want it to be higher, so in order to get my 6,000 height, I want to not resize the image. I just want to expand the canvas because I like the image the way it is, and you'll see why I'm doing that here in a second. Let's go 6,000 pixels high, hit enter, and as you can see, I've got that. So here's what I like about Paint 3D. I can go to select up here in the corner, and then I can select this area right here. I'm going to stretch that. Boom. I now have red color all over the top. And I can do the same down here. I don't have as much area to work with here, so I don't want to catch any of that other color. There. Now I'm all red. So what I got to do next is I want to do, okay, this is a B battery and it's going to be 45 volts. So let's get rid of all this here. I don't want any of this. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm just going to cover that up with an area I selected. Alright, and then if I go to my text, gosh, let's set this up for 130, do 45, VOLTS, and I definitely want that to be white, so I can come over here and select white. I don't like that color or that size. That's about right. Yeah, I can reduce it a little bit. There's my 45 volts. What I can do is I can select that and I can reduce that in size a little bit. Here. I can bring that down here. There I got. Now it says 45 volts. I want this to say B battery. I don't like my text there very well, so I'm going to erase all that. That's going to say, oops, dependable B power. Let me drop that R94. Let's bold that. Okay, dependable. Alright, I like that. Size is good. Let's stretch that. And here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and select that and then just drag it. And as you can see, I can stretch that. Okay, there we go. There, now it says dependable B power. Same situation, I'm just going to cover up that hole I just made. 45 volts, dependable B power. I need my plus and my minus. Let's see, that's going to be right about there. So let's go ahead and save that. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to bring up Microsoft Word. So I'm going to just go ahead and drag and drop that image that I just produced. And there it is. Right click on it and hit size and position. My height, I want it to be about 6 inches. Let's try 6. Okay, and as you can see, when I resize that, it did 6 by 3.8, which is the size I need. Hit OK. Go ahead and put some cardstock in the printer. Hit print. And there we have my image. Okay, so just like the C battery, we're going to do the same thing. Okay. Now the wiring is very simple. It's a bunch of 9-volt batteries in series. So what I'm going to do is I put a piece of heat shrink, a little piece of heat shrink on 4 of these positive wires, or red wires. And what we're going to do is we're just going to simply hook up negative to positive, negative, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive. So let's go ahead and do that very quickly. Alright, so there you have it. 5 batteries in series. Positive, we'll go to positive. It's just a matter of hooking up all the batteries. And putting them in place. Alright, so a bit of wire management here. Tuck them all in here. And there you have it. Negative. And I'm reading 49.6, which is, you know, they're going to be a little over 9 volts apiece. So that's fine. That's my 45 volts. So there you have it. I have a C battery and 3 B batteries. You don't think I just did one, did you? Have to do more than one. I went ahead and while I was doing the one, I was doing the others as well. So what I've got here is my current project requires several voltages. I have 7 wires coming from it. Now I need my 6 volts for the filaments. So I need my 6 volt filament voltage, I need 45 volts, I need 90 volts, which is going to be these 2 combined, I need 135 volts, which is these 3 combined. I also need a minus 4.5 volts for a C battery on 2 wires. So we're going to go ahead and call that a wrap. You'll be able to see these batteries used in my next project, which I'll get into in just a minute. Some lessons learned on this one. I would definitely use screws on the battery clips. I didn't use them because I didn't have any at the time. The problem I had was the wood was really thin, so I had to find some really tiny screws. The other thing I'd do is I'd put the battery clips a little bit lower in the battery boxes, only because that would prevent them from tipping while using them. So the total cost on each battery was around $25. All the parts are available online, so that's reasonable considering they are reusable. So as far as my next project, I'm going to be doing a 1927 Chelsea Truphonic 6, and let me tell you, that one is an adventure. There's a lot going on in that one, and I really have got a lot of work to do on the editing of that one. Now, future projects, I'd like to do one on power supplies, kind of a follow-up to the battery theme. I have some power supplies that are handmade. I have some power supplies that are commercially bought, and we'll just talk about how they're used in the early radio restoration process, and also how they're used back in the day, because they did use battery eliminators as soon as power supplies were available. So I really hope you enjoyed it. Happy restorations, everybody, and I hope to see you again next video. Goodbye.